Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Wieland and I'm presenting this from Australia, which is bittersweet really. I feel very honoured to be part of this program, but at the same time I really wish I was in New York. So I've got my ticket booked, ready to come on the 5th of June, but obviously that's not going to happen. So I sort of tweaked what I was going to present on today because I feel that we're in a different situation. Times have changed dramatically from when I submitted my paper and presentation or what I was going to do. So I've changed it to my observations of online learning before, during and after COVID. And as someone who's been teaching in both face-to-face and the online space for about 20 years in general education, and probably the last 10 of those I've been in the online space, I just am going to share my observations. And I want to point out that I'm going to be telling a lot of stories and I'm going to share a lot of my experiences, but I've also written a paper. So if you want to see more of a robust discussion around a lot of this, feel free to have a look at the paper. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, because as someone from down in the Southern Hemisphere, most of you have probably not heard of me. A bit of my observations of generally in the creation of online learning and how it's evolved and how we've changed how we deliver it in the last 10, 15 years. What has changed during COVID? What happened during COVID? And then finally I'm going to have a bit of a futurist approach and spend a bit of time talking about what I think might come out of this. But of course, who knows? So there is a note there that I did do a paper, so with my colleague Liz Colliers, so feel free to go and have a look at that. So a little bit about me is my background is I studied law in the early 1990s, so that gives you an indication I've been around for a long time in this space, or working for a long time. And very quickly, I often say it was, I think, lunchtime the first day of my job that I realised I didn't want to be a lawyer. I really didn't like it. So whilst I was practising, I went off and did an IT postgraduate degree, which was quite new. I mean, this is really early 1990s, mid-1990s. The internet was just coming out, so that gives you an indication of how long ago it was. And as a result of that, I moved out of practicing law and I got a job at LexisNexis as a trainer. And LexisNexis still is a publishing company, and they were just in the process of moving all of the legislation and cases onto CD-ROMs. So my job was to teach the legal industry predominantly how to use this, including all the judges from the different courts around Australia. And I have to say it was the most incredible experience to learn how to be a trainer and an educator, because as someone who is very junior, my job was to train some really, really well-regarded senior experts in an industry. And I'll give you a story that I always think formed who I became as an educator. So one of my very first jobs was to teach a group of judges from one of the higher courts in Australia how to research using this new technology. And I remember as a 25, 26-year-old being absolutely terrified. For about a week I barely slept, and I designed it and I practiced and I designed and I practiced, and I had all of these expectations of what it was going to look like. And I walked into the room and there was probably I think it was about 15 of them, and they were all sitting at their desk, and the only way I'd ever been dealt with a judge was in front of them as a solicitor, so I hadn't been behind the curtain as such and met them as people. So I went in and I started writing my name up on the board, and I said to them, everyone just click on, now remember we're talking a long time ago, everyone just click on the icon that says LexisNexis. And I heard bang, crash, and some people were clicking the mouse on the screen, some people had it on the floor. And I realised in that moment a couple of things. One is all the planning went out the window. We spent the next half an hour playing solitaire, just simply how to learn how to use a mouse. But the second thing I learned is I was an expert in something, they were an expert in something, and my job was to be able to make the information I had accessible to them and teach them. And it wasn't necessarily about just dumping everything I knew on them. It was about understanding my audience, understanding what they needed, and really building the scaffolding to a point where they were able to learn. So it was a really fabulous starting point, and it's something has taken with me where I've taught all over the world. I've taught in universities all over the world and presented all over the world, and I've realised stick in your space and understand your audience, and everyone's got something to offer as an educator. I then went out solo, and I've been basically solo ever since. Then I had children, and I didn't want to go back to the sort of grind of everyday working, so I started a company called CPD Interactive. And CPD Interactive is where I really moved into the online and working space, or education. So in Australia, all lawyers have to do 10 hours of professional development a year, and there was no online offering, and that's where I moved into. So it was a really nice fit of my IT, my law, and my education. And that is the journey I'm going to talk a little bit about. I've also been teaching at Melbourne Law School, so I lecture there, and I have done for about 14 years. And then a few years ago, as part of my journey, I was getting very frustrated with the authoring tools out there. I found them very template-driven, very text-driven, and that led me to be one of the founders of Vidversity, which is a tool that allows you to build online learning really easily using video. So that's my story in a nutshell, but gives you a sense of my journey and how I have sort of grown with the online learning space right at the beginning as someone who had the IT and education. I've been growing in this space as it's been developing. So I just thought this is an opportunity to share my insights and what I've been discovering. And then I'm going to talk quite a bit about what I've been doing through COVID. So the journey of online learning, one thing I just point out is that I often find a lot of people that I talk to about online learning, it has a bit of a bad reputation. And I think that's because the very beginning, it was seen as the poor cousin of face-to-face, because I think a lot of the time what we did is we really made PowerPoints move. So online learning became a process where we took content from a subject matter expert, we took it out of their head and made it into some kind of text-based. Now, I'm talking a long time ago, so I know we've improved, but we took it and created sort of a text-based environment that had a next and a previous button, maybe an image, and they moved through it, and there might have been some quizzes. And I think that sort of, and then there was a bit of what we call rapid e-learning, creation of rapid content, and I think we lost the learners a bit on that. I think that we didn't think enough about the learning experience, we just focused on how to get the content into an online space. So I think that sort of took us back a little bit when we initially started with the online learning. So the first authoring tools, as I said, were really not much more than something that created a moving PowerPoint. The other thing is the first authoring tools often were really hard to use. So this is a bit of a theme I'm going to be talking about throughout this is the start. Online learning, at the beginning, because of the complexity of a lot of these tools, we started to alienate the subject matter expert or the teacher a little bit. We started to create this divide with the person who delivers the content, so the person who traditionally was the presenter, and the person who built the content. And that process started to become a little bit more complex. And up until online learning, anyone who's a consultant or delivered induction training, you always just did it on your own. You created it and you presented it. But all of a sudden there was this new layer coming in that said, no, once you've designed it, someone has to actually build it. So that creation process started to add a layer of complexity, expense, and started to slow down the process too. It meant that it was no longer build and present. It was now get it out of the subject matter expert's head, design it, then it went off somewhere and got created and came back. So what started to evolve is we had a world of learners and educators, the presenters, we started to drop them out of this technical loop. So that I think we started to leave the educators behind, or teachers, or whatever you want to call them. So I sort of drew this up a little bit. The process became a bit of a disconnect between the educator and the learner, so what was ultimately delivered. So the process became a subject matter expert created some content. Then an ID might come in and storyboard and design the content. Then a creator builds the content, and then it's delivered to the learner. And I think, as someone myself who does a lot of face-to-face training as well as online, I've always liked that I've had the technical skills to deliver what I've wanted to do. I absolutely collaborate with a lot of people. I don't say it's only me who designs it, but I think I work with a lot of people who say I go through that process, and then what I actually deliver, it's not my authentic self. It's been sanitized. All this stuff has been taken out of my head and gone through this flow, but what's delivered is not what I want. And that goes back to my example with the judges. As the presenter, I adapted to that environment because I really knew my learner. I got to really understand them. Often I think this process, the distance between the educator and the learner potentially became too much. The divide became, and not to mention along the way, where each period that we're going through, so every decade or whatnot, we're leaving the educator further and further out of the technology skills, which will be, in a moment, is what I'm going to talk about. We didn't equip them for something like COVID. They weren't ready with the technology. And I'm speaking in very broad terms. I don't want people to be, I know, I'm well aware these are generalisations. I want this to be seen not as research, but rather my observations as someone who's been in this space for a long time. But I started to feel this, and I've been watching this for a while with concern, saying, I don't understand why we're not giving the tools to the teachers and the educators and the subject matter experts to be able to create some online content. So that's the first observation that I just want you to be aware of, that I feel we started to leave them behind. The next thing I want to talk about, which I feel really, really strongly about, and I think we're seeing this now with what's happening in COVID, is there's been this debate for the last 2 decades on what is better, face-to-face or online. And I really think we need to have a different discussion. It's not the mode of learning that should be the focus. It's the content. It's how it's delivered, the teaching style. A great educator is great whether they're on their feet or whether they're on Zoom. And I'm finding this really stands out at the moment while we're here in Australia, and I know a lot of people around the world are homeschooling. I love talking to my children each day, and I've got a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, about what their day looks like. Because the great teachers are still great, even though we've moved into this new world of online and delivering they're using Teams at their school. So I say to them, oh, how was PE? And they go, oh, it was shocking. And whereas the other child will go, mine was brilliant. But he always loved PE because he loved his teacher. So I think we need to, as a sort of industry, not be focused on having to, I think we have to, people constantly having to fight for the right to build online. But I think online can be amazing, just as face-to-face can be amazing. And I think online can be bad, just as face-to-face can be bad. So I think that we need to change that discussion and that debate. I don't think they compete against each other, face-to-face or online. I think good teachers and good educators are good whatever mode of learning we deliver it in. And I think that we need to really believe in that and be strong when we're presenting that concept. So then COVID arrived, which nobody could foresee or anticipate was going to happen. But it exposed a lot of issues in the teaching and training profession. A lot of people simply were not ready. And they were frightened by it and didn't. We lumped in our education system. We lumped all this expectation. We said you've got to move online. A big percentage of people didn't even know what that looked like or how to do that. We had a lot of people panicked and frightened. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what role I've been doing during COVID. So I've been employed by a number of big organisations ranging from the Melbourne University, which is a large university here in Australia, specifically in the law faculty, to a number of government bodies and then to quite a few workplaces, as something that I would kind of call a digital coach. Because what I thought I was going to be doing was helping people build things online. What became apparent to me very quickly was I was more of a coach, a support. A lot of people I dealt with were really, really freaking out. So I was dealing with professors from Switzerland, San Francisco, the US, UK, all over the world. And just about everyone I spoke to was in a flap. I had tears from very, very, very senior people saying, I simply can't do this. And it really highlighted that, what I was talking about before, why can't you do it? Because you haven't been given the tools and the skills and kept up with the training, or our industry hasn't. We haven't kept people on the front line trained in the latest tools. We've kept them in the sort of behind the room, behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz. We've said, online training's built over there at Central. Or if anyone wants online training, they've got to go to their L&D department and someone will organise it for them. So they didn't feel that they could take that leap and do it themselves. So the first step many people did is they just simply said, I'm going to move to Zoom or something similar. I'm literally going to do what I've always done, but that I've done face-to-face. So if that's induction training to my new staff, if that's compliance training, if that's lecturing, I'm literally going to get on Zoom and do the same thing. And I think every single person now has got a Zoom story where something's gone wrong. The reality is sometimes Zoom is great, sometimes it's not. The reality is not everyone's technology is the same. We've all got Zoom fatigue now, so not only is our day of work on Zoom, now our social life is on Zoom. So it's really been an interesting, a lot of people just shifted across to Zoom. So I want to talk to you about the process I've been working with, the people who have come to me or I've been coaching as such. And I've never been a coach. That's not what I say that I traditionally am. But as I said, I thought I'd just go into organisations and help them. But what I realised is they're just telling a lot of their staff, just build something online, and they don't even know where to start. So this is a bit of a process that I've come up with that has been really working and helping me talk these people through it. And the first thing you might notice is there's in this slide, there's a computer being thrown out of the window. I keep telling everyone I'm working with, don't worry about the how. You're the subject matter expert. Let's talk about what you used to do face-to-face. Let's talk about what you'd like to do. And then let's skill up on the how. Don't get bogged down with I don't know how to do that. Because we'll sort that out. That's just a skill. We can teach you the skill, but we still want you to be passionate about your delivery, passionate about your content, design the content in a meaningful way, and then we'll talk about the how. So I've been sitting with these different subject matter experts or educators or teachers, and I've sort of been going through this process with them. Now, I always say to them, you've got the content. And one of the most important things to have at the back of your mind when you're working with someone who has done face-to-face training or is used to presenting or has done your induction training, whatever it might be in your organisation, we mustn't underestimate the design that's already gone on with that content. They don't just turn up to a class, they don't just turn up to a workshop and present whatever they can think of on that day. There's been a lot of work building the scaffolding, the design. It's often been built on over years. So I'm working with a group of people who do domestic violence training for frontline workers. So they teach people how to work with victims of domestic violence. Those people have been teaching that for over 10, 15 years, the team I'm working with. So their insights and understanding, and how, if they went and looked at what they were delivering 10 years ago to what they're delivering in their workshops today, the evolution would be outstanding and amazing. So I don't want to go in and mess with that. They've got the content. So I say to them, bring to me the content you've got. Sometimes I might have to do some tweaking with making sure it's a good scaffolding and building up a skill, but most of the time the subject matter experts I work with, or the educator, the content is not the issue. So I've been saying to them, okay, get your content, and the first task that I give them is I want them to break up the content into these 4 parts. The first is static content, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to encourage people to have a bit more of a blended approach. I don't want them to feel that they have to do all Zoom, all pre-recorded, all just read a book. I want them to see what fits. So static content is something that I just have to tell the group of people. So if it was compliance training, it would be, these are the rules for occupational health and safety that you must know. And there's nothing I can do with that. That's the rules. So the static content is the stuff I talk to the group of people. I talk to the learners. I then say, what's the interactive content that you've got in there? What's the stuff that once you've given them the OH&S rules, do you do a case study? Is that more of something you want to discuss with people? You want people to work as a group? Self-paced. Self-paced content is things like, I would like you to have read this before you come to the session, or it might be anything you want the learner to do in their own time as part of the program. And then, is there any kind of assessing that you have to do? So it might not be, it might simply just be, I just want the first 3. But it might be, yes, we do quizzes, we get them to submit case studies, whatever that might be. So the very first task I say to people is, okay, here's your content. Because this is where the people come to me. So I've been doing this just about every day for the last 2 months now. The first time I talk to the person, they're almost always distraught. They're just saying, I've been told, so this one I'm working on at the moment, they've got to deliver the workshop end of June. And they're just saying, I just don't even know where to start. I've never done anything like this, just filled with anxiety. And we know as soon as you're anxious about something, your brain finds it very hard to process. It starts to just panic. So by breaking everything down, instead of running a marathon, let's run to the next tree and then the next tree. So this process is doing this, because what I say to them is, let's ignore the how. Right now, I want you to get your content, and I want you to break it down into static, interactive, self-paced, and assessment. And instantly I can see even the body language, albeit on Zoom, the person starts to relax, because that's something that they say, oh, I can do that. So I often just make the table of so I do a Word document, which is a table of all the sessions, and then I get them to add a column at the end, and I say, I just want you to put in there what's static, interactive, self-paced, or assessment. So off they often go in a group, and they simply just work through that. Then, once they've done that, they come back to me, and I keep saying to them, I do not want you to worry about the how. The next step is we then start talking about the static content is the content that can be pre-recorded. That stuff we can basically put in the can. So I'm talking video here. We could build some text-based material as well. We could build some interactive, or we could build, some animation type stuff, whatever. We'll get to that in a moment, but that's the stuff we can prepare. You don't have to deliver that on the day. All right. Now, this is what I'm doing here is for a workshop. So if you were doing, so another question I should say right at the beginning when we're talking about content, I ask them a couple of questions. I say to them, do you want to do this as a fully self-contained online module that you never have to do anything with? Or do you want to do this that has some component of live, whether that be Zoom or some component pre-recorded? So let's assume in this one they've said they want to do a bit of a combination, but if it's just fully self-contained, it's basically the same process. We just have to ask that question at the start. So the static content we can pre-record. The interactive content, now this person has said they want it to be live, so they want to have a component where all of the cohort comes together. So this might be grad training in an organisation that you want everybody to come together on a particular day, albeit on Zoom at the moment. So that interactive content, you could use live sessions. If you didn't want it to be any live stuff, you just want it to be fully self-contained, we could still make some interactive content. Self-paced, that's the stuff we want them to be able to deliver. So we're talking about any resources that they might have. So I'll say to them, have you got a handbook, a guidebook, have you got PDFs, have you got policies, all of those things that we think the learner should have access to. And then we've got the assessment. So tell me, are you wanting to create any assessment in this stuff? Then down here we start talking, now we're at the technology stage, because there's no point me coming to them and saying, I think you need to learn Zoom, I think you need to learn this, because if that's not what they're going to be doing, it's irrelevant. All right. Now, of course, it depends if you're working with an individual or an organisation. At an organisation level, you might do this and then start just giving skills to the individuals within your organisation. This is very micro. This is the process I've been doing with individuals or groups of people delivering programs. But it's something that it's a framework that can really be used with anything. So the basic concept is start with your content and decide what do you want to deliver. Do you want to deliver a self-contained online stuff, or is it blended? Then break the content down. Then talk about what that looks like. Then we talk about the technology and we skill up our team or our individual or our educator. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring back the educator into this process and work really collaboratively with them. So if we're an instructional designer, an L&D manager, we're bringing them back to work with us. We're going to empower them. We no longer work in sort of parallel. We're going to work as a team. And then we can start saying, well, actually, you need to use Loom to do your recording, and you might use Zoom to do your live session. So I've identified some skills. How competent are you? Let's get you trained up in those. So that process I found to be extremely powerful for people who are overwhelmed with all of this. So I'm just going to tell you a few stories of what's happened or some observations I've made throughout this. The first one is, I don't know if any of you recognise that picture. That was a news reporter, I think in 2019, who delivered some news, and in the background his children turned up. And it ended up on the news all over the world. And I think that really highlights how different we are now. The reality is, I don't think anybody has tried to deliver something in the last few months if that was on the news every day when that happened to one of us, it would be 24/7, 3,000 stories a minute. So the world is very different now in the online space. And so that's a really amazing thing for us. It means we've got an opportunity to work more freely without fear of the dog barking or that. We now know that's life. So I think that we're in a very different world, and I think we need to embrace that as L&D professionals and start really not worrying about perfection. Authenticity is becoming really embraced within reason. We've always understood that we need to be professional, but it's a very different world. We're in people's lounge rooms now, and we've never been there before. One of the other pieces of advice or things that I keep reminding people, I'm finding so many people are very, very, very overwhelmed with the technology and how to do this. Don't forget about the learner, okay? The learner for the first time ever, just about everyone in the world is in the online space. So we've got to remember they've got an anxiety around that too. But also, they have got to be kept stimulated. So if you are going to be doing something in Zoom, keep thinking about, just as you would when you design content in any other world, how long can they stay engaged? I mean, I'm speaking for a long time today, and I'm feeling very concerned that you go, oh, it's a long talk. So I would love to do some activities and ask the audience something. We'll do a Q&A session at the end, but I think we must remember to do things like breakout rooms, polls, whatever that might be that you would normally do when you're delivering training. Make sure you've always got the learner at the back of your mind. So take them with you on the journey and make sure we're keeping them always in our thoughts of how we can keep them engaged. This one, I love this story. I was working with a professor, a very, very highly regarded professor he works in building law in a university in the UK. And he rang me, and I was about 2 a.m, and him and I were on Zoom chatting, and he said he prided himself on being an innovative or an exciting teacher. He was a passionate teacher. And I said to him, and he'd been given the brief to make 15-minute videos because someone had told him 15 minutes is the standard that you should present a video. And he was really saying to me, I don't want to make 15-minute videos. I want to make longer videos. My content is really rich, deep and heavy. And I said to him, what do you usually do for your class? And he said, well, the first day I take them on a tour of the city, and we talk about some of the key buildings, and I tell them the story and the history of the building and issues that might have had with planning and whatnot, because he said, I'm very proud of my city. And I said to him, what's your laws around COVID? Are you allowed out and about? And he said, we're allowed to go for an exercise, a walk, or do any exercise. And I said to him, grab your phone and make a tour. Go around and tell the stories, because that's such an integral part of your teaching, and I'm sure it will keep the students so engaged. And he was someone who'd never done anything like that before. He said, I've never even taken a selfie. I said, don't worry about it. So I took him through some hints and tips, and we had a bit of a practice. So I spoke about him. Ironically, this picture, they've got the camera portrait, but I said to him, film landscape. We got him some headphones with his microphone on it that came with his phone. I said, head off to the city and just go for it. Just tell your stories. Don't worry if there's background noise. And that was probably about March, and he emailed me sort of beginning of May to say he'd delivered his online content, and he said he got the most incredible feedback from his students. Now remember, the brief had been make short 15-minute videos, give PowerPoints out, teach on Zoom. So he stood out as absolutely exceptional. He was doing what he loved. He was doing as an educator, delivering it the way he felt passionate about and knew that worked. And he was able to continue to be creative. So by going through that process that I did with you before, he was able to say, well, I do these tours. I said, well, record it. That's static content. Go and do it. And it's really been an incredible journey for me to help these people feel like what I'm trying to do is make sure that face-to-face is never seen as the poor cousin. I want it to be an amazing way to deliver content that's accessible and anybody can access it and really have great learning outcomes. So it's not something that's done because of COVID. I hope we use this opportunity to know people can make great stuff online. So just in closing, I want to talk about coming out of COVID, what I think we're going to learn from this. The first thing is I want to talk a little bit about mindset. And if you want to do a bit of research around mindset, there's Carol Dweck, but there's also some great things around the beginner's mindset. And I think that that's a really important thing we need to understand at the moment. So one of the things, and I don't like to say it's generational, and I don't want to make sweeping statements like that, but if I give my 16-year-old a new app or something in the technology world to have a play with, I watch him and he just seems to assume there's an undo button for everything. He never panics. He never asks me, what does this button do? He just clicks the button. Whereas when I'm working with a lot of people, I find they've got that, and I would call that a beginner mindset. A beginner mindset is embracing something is, I just want to have a go. I know I can't play piano for a concert yet, but I'm going to try and have a go at piano. It doesn't scare me. And a lot of the people I'm working with, they're calling me 5 times a day saying, what happens if I click I click on cut video? What happens if I click record? And I really hope what comes out of this for the whole world, not just in the education space, not just L&D, but I hope this sense of have a go. So I'm saying to people I'm working with, I've been working with a guy the last couple of weeks who just seems getting so concerned about what if something goes wrong. I said to him yesterday, just assume everything has an undo button, because the reality is when we're building online learning, it doesn't go live until someone's seen it. It doesn't go live until you've published it and put it in your learning management system or however you're going to deliver it. So I hope we say to our people who are delivering education, just have a go. Don't be frightened by the technology. So we've lifted the curtain behind the Wizard of Oz. Let's show them the technology. Let's be really open to including them in this process with us. Let's not say, oh, that's something a specialist has to do. Let's say to the subject matter experts, you can have a go. So this mindset is, to me, a really critical part of what we've got to do as L&D leaders and professionals. We need to digitally empower people to come in on this journey and help us build great online content for our staff and organisations. So I want a more collaborative approach. I want a world where the subject matter expert is central to the process. Not it's the content's taken out of their head and then it ends up somewhere and 2 months later they come back to that. And it reminds me of the time when I was a junior lawyer a long time ago. I used to have to dictate into a dictaphone my letter, and then it took 3 days to come back to me and I'd have to change one word or it wasn't exactly how I hoped it was. That process was so slowed down, and I feel like that we've done a bit of that in the way we create online learning. And I have to actually say, that's why I developed Vidversity. The whole reason I developed the platform, I never intended it to be a commercial product that was a business. I created it so myself and a lot of the lawyers I worked with, we could actually build online learning without having to go. We could film with our phone, we could upload it to Vidversity, edit it, add some questions and put it in the learning management system. And I think video is such a fabulous tool to be able to deliver this content and to be able to include the subject matter expert. And for anyone who says to me, oh, but video is expensive to produce and develop, we do not have to produce cinema quality content. It goes back to that. It's not necessarily the mode we have to worry about, it's the quality of the content and the delivery. And anyone who says to me, I don't think this will fly, I say to them, you only have to look what happened. The learners have had a revolution, they've revolted. They learn from YouTube. If any of us wants to know how to play drums, knit something, cook a pie, we go to YouTube. We learn from it every day. So I think video is a really key part of our future. The next step, I think we're really getting a sense online that there's 2 kinds of online. There's synchronous and there's asynchronous. And I think we need to make sure that COVID has not been an opportunity to just do what I've always done and move it into a synchronous environment where I just deliver with Zoom, and as soon as the curtains open, as soon as I'm allowed back out, I just swap back to what I was doing because the horse has bolted. I don't think we're ever going to work the same again. I think we're going to have environments at work that look very different. There's going to be people working from home for a long time. I think there'll be choices for how we work will look different. I think we won't even necessarily work in the same cities if we're a team. So I think we're going to have to make sure we really understand, and that's back to that framework that I did, that's not just dump it all on Zoom and wait till this passes. it's going to be a blended approach forevermore. And I think there'll be a lot of, so for instance, I'm working with an aged care community at the moment that's got 5,000 staff. They've always done their induction training face-to-face. At the moment, the amount of healthcare workers that they need, it's just made it impossible. So they just decided they'd put it on Zoom. Well, that's just exhausting, not scalable, and has been fraught with technical issues. So I went in 6 weeks ago, we filmed 9 videos with a phone. We edited them and we deliver now that they've delivered something like 3,900 training modules. So it took a week to film, a week to edit and create, and then in the space of about 4 weeks they've delivered 3,900. And that means the healthcare system got up and running quicker. I mean, that's just a fantastic feel-good story, and that's the kind of stories we need in this online space to say, irrespective if the curtains were open and we're back out, we cannot deliver that kind of service. And the content was beautiful because it was delivered by their staff. It wasn't generic content that came with a learning management system. It was, what uniform do you need to wear? We filmed someone in there explaining the parts of the uniform, what you have to wear, who can wear what, from someone authentically in the organisation. So an understanding of synchronous and asynchronous and blending offerings. Blended offerings is what's going to come out of this. We're going to forevermore have to have no one's going to be able to rely entirely on face-to-face ever again. And I work with a lot of consultants who run leadership programs or whatever that might be, and they can't wait to get back out there. And I keep saying, I just don't think organisations will confidently pay $10,000 for you to run your daily workshop once for 7 people. You are going to have to offer blended solutions now. So whether that's all of it online or whether it's a combination, but blended offerings are literally the future. And then based on the YouTube, TikTok generation coming through, online learning is going to remain a key part of what the future looks like in learning. We are, I think, gone are the days where people have to compare the two. I think now is the time for us to shine and show what great online learning looks like. And then I think it's here to stay in many different formats. I don't think it always has to be formal. It can be a TikTok. I mean, the reality is, while we have these debates of what online learning is, literally millions of people are learning from all different online environments. So let's learn from them. Let's listen to the learners and say, so sometimes it can be a YouTube video, sometimes it's a highly polished production, sometimes it's in storylines, sometimes it's in Rise. It's going to be all different things. And that's what learning's always been, a mix of great, exciting, rich content. And that's our job, to make sure that we make that available for all of the learners in our organisations and around us. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you found that really useful. Like I say, that's my observations. I'm just one person. We're all going to share and learn from each other in this exciting time for L&D, because it's like a revolution in L&D. And feel free, anyone, to reach out to me, and I'm now available for questions. Thank you so much.